Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Bhagavad-gita Satsang. I'm Hari-kirtana. It's so nice to see you again. A pleasure, as always, for me to be able to spend this time with you, and an honor to have you here with me. And if you can hear me, please hit the little raise your hand icon. All right, I can be heard. I trust by all of you. I'm seeing a few hands come up. Very good. Thank you for your compliance with my request. I trust that you all see me as well. And let's go ahead and move through a few other housekeeping items, as is our usual way of doing things. So for those of you who are new to the satsang, you can adjust your audio settings and your viewing options in the upper right-hand corner. You need not worry about your microphone or video camera because I cannot see or hear you, even though you can see and hear me. If you would like to be heard, you can type a comment or question into the chat window. And Evelyn, can you still not see me? I should be in a little window in the upper right-hand corner of your screen at the moment. And Annie, thank you very much for your welcome back. Yeah, if there's any kind of technical issue, let me know, and I will do my best to resolve it for you. And with that, you cannot hear. All right, so I have one person who cannot hear me. All right, my audio is on. I'm seeing a little green light in the microphone. Other people raised their hands. So I'm not really sure. You can see the slides. Yes, and I'm in a black box. Okay, well, that's how that should be. But I'm concerned that Annie can't hear me. So, so everyone hold on for just a second. Okay, so hopefully we will have a fix for everyone, just making sure that, no, my mute is off. Carly, you're not asking me. Okay. Okay, on the optimistic assumption that everyone's audio is working, and the video should also be there. Hopefully, when I go to full screen audio, full screen video, you should be able to see me again. Okay, so last time, a couple of weeks ago in our last class, we covered austerity, the first value of yoga, and we looked at austerity, or penance, as it is sometimes translated, in the three qualities of material nature. We covered verses 14 through 19. Tonight's class, we resume with a look at charity, or giving of gifts, in the three qualities of material nature. And then we're going to pivot to some very important and somewhat technical verses about the threefold indication of Brahman. And this will be Krishna's explanation of how you take a mundane activity that's in the mode of goodness and elevate it to the transcendental position. And I will take a little step back to where we left off in the 16th chapter in order to contextualize this. We'll cover verses 20 through 28, which will finish out the chapter on the yoga of the threefold divisions of faith. As always, we will begin with our invocation mantra, and a quick note about the transliterated Sanskrit and the diacritical marks that give us pronunciation cues. This will come up again when we chant tonight's verse together. The dot over an M indicates that we close our lips and at the same time close the back of our tongue to the back of the roof of our mouth, making a very round shape with our mouth as if wrapping our mouth around a little walnut. A bar over a vowel, in this case an A, indicates an open and elongated version of that vowel, ah, as opposed to a short or truncated version of that same vowel, And with that information, I will chant this invocation mantra, and if you like, you can chant it back. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Translation: I offer my respects to the Supreme Person, the Son of Vasudeva, who is the all-pervading transcendence. And I want to take a second to note how this mantra begins with the seed sound Om, indicating the absolute reality or the Supreme Person. Bhagavate is also a word that indicates the Supreme Person, or that person who is complete in all opulences, all strength, all wealth, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation are possessed by Bhagavan, therefore the Supreme Person. Om can also indicate the absolute truth, and for one who understands that absolute truth as including a personal feature, and who understands the personal feature to be the highest feature of the absolute truth, then it indicates the Supreme Person as well. I bring this up now because it's going to come back later as we move through the text that we're covering this evening. Okay. So last week, austerities in the three qualities of material nature, and also specifically, we focused on austerity in the mode of goodness. It is said that austerity is the wealth of the Brahmanas, and particularly austerity as described in the last several verses that are in the mode of goodness are the wealth or the opulence of the Brahmins. That is to say, those spiritually enlightened intellectuals who act as the eyes, the head, the brain of the social body, who direct the society toward spiritual advancement. And we looked at three different kinds of austerity: austerity of the body, of speech, and of mind. So purity, sincerity, control of the senses, and particularly control of one's sensual desires, the direction of sexual energy, the transmutation of sexual energy towards spiritual objectives, and nonviolence. These would be considered austerities of the body in the mode of goodness. Speaking in a manner that does not disturb people, that is truthful, pleasing, and beneficial, as well as the practice of scriptural recitation, are considered to be austerities of speech, constraining one's speech to spiritual subject matter as opposed to spending a lot of time chit-chatting about mundane stuff, or seeing the mundane stuff of the world in a spiritual context and responding to it from that point of view. And then serenity of mind, gentleness, gravity, self-control. These are considered austerities of the mind. So that was what we focused on last time out. This time, in verses 20 through 28 of this chapter, we'll finish out this idea of different activities according to these three qualities of material nature, and then see how we spiritualize all of these activities beyond the limitations of the qualities of material nature altogether. So with that, I'm going to read through the translation of each of these verses we're covering tonight. Then we will go back and look at each verse in detail. Tonight, I will be using translations from A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada's Bhagavad-gita as it is, as opposed to using my own translations. And I also will refer to some verses translated by Graham Schwag in his edition of the Bhagavad-gita, The Beloved Lord's Secret Love Song. So we begin with the first three verses, which will be about charity or giving gifts according to the three different qualities of material nature. Text number 20, translation. Charity given out of duty, without expectation of return, at the proper time and place, and to a worthy person, is considered to be in the mode of goodness. Text 21. But charity performed with the expectation of some return, or with a desire for fruitive results, or in a grudging mood, is said to be charity in the mode of passion. Text 22. And charity performed at an impure place, at an improper time, to unworthy persons, or without proper attention and respect, is said to be in the mode of ignorance. Text 23. From the beginning of creation, the three words Om Tat Sat were used to indicate the supreme absolute truth. These three symbolic representations were used by Brahmins while chanting the hymns of the Vedas during sacrifices for the satisfaction of the Supreme. Text 24. Therefore, transcendentalists undertaking performances of sacrifice, charity, and penance in accordance with scriptural regulations begin always with Om to attain the Supreme. Verse 25, without desiring fruitive results, one should perform various kinds of sacrifice, penance, and charity with the word tat. The purpose of such transcendental activities is to get free from material entanglement. Text 26 and 27 together. The absolute truth is the objective of devotional sacrifice, and it is indicated by the word sat. The performer of such sacrifice is also called sat, as are all works of sacrifice, penance, and charity, which, true to the absolute nature, are performed to please the Supreme Person, O son of Prita. And text 28, anything done as sacrifice, charity, or penance without faith in the Supreme, O son of Prita, is impermanent. It is called asat and is useless both in this life and the next. So that takes us to the end of the chapter. Now we'll go back and discuss each of these in detail. So, text 20 once again. Charity given out of duty, without expectation of return at the proper time and place and to a worthy person, is considered to be in the mode of goodness. To expand on this a little bit, I will read Graham Schwagg's translation as well. That gift which is given with the thought that this should be given to one who may not act reciprocally at an appropriate place, at appropriate time and place, that gift is to be remembered as having the nature of sattva, or goodness. So the first element of a gift given in the mode of goodness is that one understands it simply should be done. And as we head into the home stretch of the Bhagavad-gita, we'll find that Krishna is going to return to this idea of dutiful action. Action undertaken simply because it should be done. You do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, not because of the result you're going to get from it, not because there's something in it for you. There may even be a sacrifice involved, but because it should be done simply on principle, one makes such a sacrifice, or one gives the gift even though there's no profit to be had for the gift giver, without any expectation of return. At the proper time and place. So being a good judge of time, place, and circumstance, seeing when it is appropriate to give a gift, or when is the most opportune time, or the time and situation, or time and place that will most benefit the person receiving the gift, or the ultimate beneficiary of the gift. Then to a worthy person. So who is a worthy person? In our earlier verses, we heard that one who offers respect to the wise, to the twice born, or the Brahmins, the spiritually enlightened intellectuals of society. Those who know what is to be done and what is not to be done. This would be considered a worthy person, someone who has the power of discernment that enables them to utilize this gift for the maximum benefit of all people concerned. Someone who will not use the gift selfishly or in some destructive manner, self-destructive or otherwise destructive. So this is considered to be charity or gift giving in the mode of goodness. In our next verse, and if you have any questions or comments at any point, please go ahead and pop them in the chat. You can also use the Q&A box if you prefer. I will see it either way, but at any point in time, please feel free to ask a question or add a comment. So the next verse, but charity performed with the expectation of some return, or with a desire for fruitive results, or in a grudging mood, is said to be charity in the mode of passion. And once again, I'll share Graham Schwagg's translation of the same verse. But that gift which is given with the aim of gaining a returned favor, or further aspiring for the fruit, or which is given reluctantly, that gift is said to be remembered as having the nature of rajas, or the mode of passion. So for example, if you are the leader of a powerful country and you are giving a gift of military aid to a smaller ally, but you hold back the gift and tell your ally, I need you to do me a favor. That would be charity performed in the mode of passion. Not that that would ever happen, or if it did happen, that there would ever be any consequences of doing such a thing. But at least now we know how to characterize or categorize this kind of I need a favor from you gift giving insofar as the Bhagavad-gita is concerned. And here we have a good example of how the Bhagavad-gita gives us a very nice lens to see contemporary events, the modern world. From Carla, I'm assuming that charity can also be acts of kindness and volunteering and not just giving money or stuff. Yes, most definitely. In fact, I'll come back to this in just a moment because there was something else that I read in the news just very recently that has to do with this exact thing, acts of kindness rather than a gift of money or stuff. So yeah, thank you, Carla. I'll come back to this and elaborate on this in just a moment. Text 22, charity performed at an impure place at an improper time to unworthy persons or without proper attention and respect is said to be in the mode of ignorance. And once again, the other translation of this same verse, that gift which is given at an inappropriate time and place to unworthy persons without acting respectfully or with contempt, that is declared to be of the nature of tamas, or the mode of ignorance. So sometimes out of compassion, we may give a gift of charity to someone who is actually not going to use that gift for their own betterment, but rather will do something to kill their pain in a superficial way that will need to be applied over and over and over again, and actually has the effect of degrading their consciousness even further, which is the kind of consciousness that put them in the position of needing the charity in the first place. Improper time and place. So that's one kind of charity in the mode of ignorance or kindness that is said to be, however well-intentioned, in the mode of ignorance, because it perpetuates the covering of ignorance in the person or persons to whom that charity is given. Also, charity or gifts given to the right person, the appropriate person, in appropriate circumstances, but without respect or with contempt for the person receiving this gift. In other words, taking reluctance or grudging giving to a higher level. This would also be gift giving in the mode of ignorance. So far in our chapter, foods, sacrifice, austerities, and charity have been divided into three categories according to the three qualities of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And here we see very practical examples of how to understand the gunas, the three qualities of material nature, in a very practical way. But whether these activities are performed in goodness, passion, or ignorance, which are understood here to be hierarchical, that is to say, ignorance is the lowest, passion is the next highest, and goodness is the topmost. Whether these activities are performed in any of these three categories, even at the topmost level, they're still compromised by the material modes of nature, by which I mean that they will not be elevating, they will not elevate one to a transcendental or spiritual position. In other words, when we engage in all of these activities that are described in this chapter in the mode of goodness, we're generating good karma. And our objective in yoga is not to generate good karma, it's to burn up whatever karma we've got while not taking on any new karma that we have to be responsible for. In other words, we don't want to be acting in such a way as to generate a favorable reaction. We want to be acting in such a way as to generate no reaction or no material reaction at all. We want to be acting in such a way as to create a spiritual impression on the mind that pushes back against all the material impressions on the mind. In the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali speaks of these as samskaras, impressions on the mind that can be either favorable or unfavorable to the project of yoga. So in these next verses, Krishna is going to speak about how to spiritualize these activities in order to elevate them above and beyond the modes of material nature altogether, and in the process elevate us beyond the modes of material nature. And I will come back and share the screen once again, because this next verse is one that we are going to chant together. I'll go through the diacritical marks once again. So we have the pronunciation cues, the dot. We see now Om returns, and I've already explained the dot over the M in Om. An accent mark over an S indicates an SH sound that's sounded from the back of one's throat, back by one's jaw. So you curl your tongue back up to the back of the roof of your mouth, and the sound is a kind of pink noise, heavier sound, as opposed to a regular SH sound from right behind one's teeth. Shh. A dot under an N, you're going to place your tongue back on the roof of your mouth a bit rather than right behind your teeth. So instead of it's a little bit subtle, na, as opposed to na. A dot under an H at the end of a word is just a short stop on the vowel that precedes it, unless the dot under an H at the end of the word is at the end of a line, in which case a short version of the vowel that precedes the H is echoed back. So you'll see what that sounds like when we do it. A C is always a CH sound, sounded also from the center of one's mouth rather than from right behind one's teeth. Cha, as opposed to cha. A J is usually a J sound unless it precedes an N with a tilde over it. The N with the tilde over it puts a little body English in it, adding kind of a Y-ish sound. So it's nya. You put the flat part of your tongue up against the back of the roof of your mouth to make that sound, nya. And the J turns into a G sound. So you put the two together and you get gya. And there you have it. That covers the bars across the vowels. In this case, all A's indicate a long open version of the ah sound as opposed to a short sound. And with that, I will chant each line one by one, and you can chant each line back if you like. Here we go. Om Tat Sad Iti Nirdesho Brahmanastri vidha smritaha. Brahmanastena vedhascha. Yagyascha vihita pura. Translation. From the beginning of creation, the three words Om Tat Sat were used to indicate the supreme absolute truth. These three symbolic representations were used by Brahmins while chanting the hymns of the Vedas and during sacrifices for the satisfaction of the Supreme. So the sacrifices that Krishna is referring to would be a Vedic ritualistic ceremony where Brahmins are chanting the hymns of the Vedas and engaged in rituals that involve lighting a fire, pouring different substances on the fire while chanting these sacred and purifying mantras. So pouring ghee on the fire, clarified butter, and then offering varieties of other substances into the fire while chanting these hymns. Notice how this is spoken of in the past tense. I want to take a look at Graham Schwagg's translation of this same verse. Om Tat Sat. These are the designations of Brahman, which are remembered as threefold. By this, the Brahmins and the Vedas and sacrifices were ordained in ancient times. So a little different phraseology, more or less the same meaning. When a Brahmin, remember in an earlier verse, we spoke about respect to the twice born, that is to say, someone who is qualified to receive diksha initiation or initiation for into the, let's call it, for lack of a better word, caste of a Brahmin, or the social position of a Brahmin, the spiritual position of a Brahmin. So when one is ordained, then mantras are given and chanted in the ceremony that is associated with that ordination. So ordained in ancient times. Again, we have reference here in past tense, which is appropriate because performing these kinds of sacrifices requires Brahmins who are qualified to perform them, to chant the mantras properly. And in this particular season of time, the age of Kali, that we're currently in, we really do not have Brahmins with this level of qualification that can chant the Vedic hymns in the proper way so as to execute the kinds of sacrifices that are being referred to here. That is not to say that we have no Brahmins, because we do, and there are rituals that can and should be performed that are meaningful and create, once again, a spiritual samskara, an impression on the mind that is conducive to advancement on the path of yoga. However, what would be called the karma kanda portion of the Vedas, that's that portion of the Vedas that is concerned with generating good karma, which previously Krishna downplayed as the flowery words of the Vedas meant for making one's material life better in one form or fashion. That sort of thing just doesn't work in the age of Kali, in this particular season of time that we're in. Remember, the Bhagavad-gita is understood to have been spoken at a juncture between ages or seasons of time. So just as the previous age, where sacrifices of this nature were possible, was ending, and the beginning of Kali Yuga, where it's really no longer possible to do that sort of thing, that's when the Gita is being spoken. Hence, the reference to past performance of sacrifice, rather than saying this is what you should do for Vedic sacrifices of this kind in the future. So how this applies to what we should do in the here and now, I'll get to in just a moment. The chanting of Om Tat Sat, or any name of God, any name of the absolute truth, the supreme person, purifies whatever activity the chanting of those names is combined with. Therefore, the chanting of the names or the sound representation of the Supreme should accompany all of the activities that we've already spoken about, such as the preparation, the selection and preparation of food, the performance of austerities, any acts of sacrifice, or any gifts one gives. For example, now getting back to Carla's comment here about kindness and volunteering rather than just giving stuff. I was recently reading of a case where a conviction of people acting on the basis of their religious beliefs was overturned. These people were going out into the desert in an area known for illegal immigrant crossings. But that was a particularly brutal portion of the desert where many people had died in the attempt to come to the United States across its southern border. And these people who were part of a Unitarian Universalist church were going out into the desert along the known path that people were taking and leaving water and food. They were arrested for trespassing and leaving property and, you know, some other thing that was meant to dissuade them on the basis that anything one does to encourage illegal immigration is a bad thing. Their conviction was overturned because they were acting not against any federal law, but in consort with their religious beliefs. So this was charity, not only in the mode of goodness, but based on an understanding of what the supreme person in their particular faith form expected of them. It was their duty to do it. It wasn't something that you could do or not do. It was, if you see something, do something according to religious conviction. So that's an example of how something that appears to be mundane, giving someone water or food, becomes spiritualized when it's done in conjunction with a, not just a mundane conception of charity, but in a spiritual conception of charity. So to elaborate on this further, I'm just going to take a quick step back to the previous chapter, chapter 16. In texts 23 through 24, Krishna spoke about actions that were conducive to gradual elevation through the modes of nature from ignorance to goodness, and eventually to spiritual consciousness. So in those verses, he said, a person who has escaped the three gates of hell, lust, anger, and greed, performs acts that are conducive to self-realization. and thus gradually attains the supreme destination. One who discards scriptural injunctions and acts according to their own whims attains neither perfection, nor happiness, nor the supreme destination. Therefore, one should understand what is one's duty and what is not one's duty according to the regulations or injunctions of Scripture. Knowing such rules and regulations, one should act so that one may be gradually elevated. So that's kind of where we leave off in chapter 16 with this idea of gradual elevation through the qualities of material nature by dutiful acquiescence to the directions of Scripture, as opposed to making stuff up, which is where Arjuna starts us in the 17th chapter. He asked, what is the position of someone who ignores scriptural directives in favor of faith or imagination? Or, to put it another way, in favor of empirical speculation. So Krishna has been answering this question. What is the position of such a person? Up to verse 22. One who acts without following the regulations of Scripture will not attain the absolute truth. They'll only get temporary results, be they good, if they're in the mode of goodness, or frustrating, if they're in the mode of passion, or degrading, if they are in the mode of ignorance. So here in verse 23, Krishna is pivoting to how to perform actions that conform to these scriptural directions and subsequently result in the elevation of consciousness by adding the element, the essential element of transcendence, namely the absolute truth of the Supreme Person. So Om Tat Sat indicates the absolute truth, and it's derived from passages we find in the Rig Veda and the Chandogya Upanishad. So the first goal is to understand the spiritual nature of everything, or to understand Brahman. So Om is a name of Brahman, a seed mantra that doesn't really have a direct translation. We can think of it as the impersonal sound representation of the Supreme. This Om is described in the Rig Veda in a few places. Om Tad Vishno Paramam Padam is a passage from the Rig Veda that indicates the lotus feet of Vishnu are the supreme devotional platform. So here we have an indication not just of Brahman, that is to say, a featureless aspect of spiritual existence, but Vishnu, a personal form who's got feet that are like lotuses. In our invocation mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om indicating the absolute reality or Brahman, and then Bhagavan, the person possessing all opulences, and specifically Krishna, the son of Vasudeva. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, or the Bhagavad Purana, the son of Vasudeva, who's called Vasudeva as a patronymic, is Krishna. And in the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna has already told us that of sacred sounds, he is the sound Om. That is to say, the sound vibration Om is synonymous with Krishna himself. This sound vibration Om is also declared to be indicative or representative of Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, by Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras. So realization of the absolute truth is our first goal when we add Om Tat Sat to whatever activity we're engaged with in. The second goal, Tat, that is to say the cognition of our spiritual nature is encapsulated by the phrase Tat Tvam Asi. This is found in the Chandogya Upanishad. You are that. That is to say, you are Brahman, or it is the partner phrase to aham, meaning I, brahmasmi, I am Brahman. So Tat Tvam Asi is often understood by impersonalist or non-dualistic philosophers as meaning I am Brahman, therefore I am God. Everyone is ultimately one. There is no every, there is really just one, and the whole every part of everyone is illusory. So that's one way to understand it. The personalists, which would be the Vaishnava or devotees of Vishnu, the philosophers who subscribe to this understanding of Vedic philosophy, say that this is a qualitative oneness. That is to say, every individual person is ultimately composed of the same spiritual substance, namely Brahman. And in the Bhagavad-gita, at the very beginning, verse 212, Krishna confirms the reality of our spiritual individuality as an eternal feature when he says, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings assembled on the battlefield, nor in the future is there any possibility that any of us will ever cease to be. So the personalists have this understanding that Tat Tvam Asi is an indication of our ultimate spiritual substance, not that we are ourselves the supreme absolute truth, and that our enlightenment will make us simultaneously omniscient, all-pervading, and end any conception of individual personality that we may have. And then the third goal, Sat, is indicated elsewhere in the Chandogya Upanishad as Sad Eva Saumya. That is certainly eternal, O gentle one, is the actual translation there. So the understanding that everything is ultimately composed of spirit, including ourselves, and that this is an eternal condition, are the three goals. And with this comes an understanding of our relationship with the supreme absolute truth. So by adding Om Tat Sat to any act as previously described, we indicate that this is something connected to the supreme person, and the act itself is ultimately intended to help us to realize our eternal connection to that supreme person. So before I go on, Carla has a question. I often give small amounts of money to elderly or disabled homeless folks by assuming that they will use the money as they claim to buy food and not indulge in vices. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to give small amounts of pocket change without feeling like I'm abetting folks in the purchase of drugs or alcohol. Is it okay to assume the best of folks? If not, I would be severely limited in making small donations to people in need. So this is a really good question, and it's very challenging. we have to use our best judgment, which is what it sounds like you're doing when we give donations out of compassion for people in need, on the assumption that they will use these donations in their best interest. So to the extent that we situate ourselves in the mode of goodness as opposed to the mode of passion and ignorance, and further, from that platform of goodness, do our best to situate ourselves in a transcendental position that allows us to really see the big picture of how people are in the world, and what is the right thing to do. How should we respond to our destiny? How should we help others respond to their destiny? To that extent, we can make good judgments, use the power of discernment to decide who is a proper person to give gifts to, when is the right time to do it, the right circumstance, the right place to do it. So it's not like a black and white thing here, but it's cultivating our own consciousness in order to use good judgment in the matter of giving gifts in charity. So just a few other words about Om, the sound Om. The sound Om, even though it moves through the air and vibrates in our ears when we chant it, is ultimately a spiritual sound vibration, non-material. The Om on the spiritual level is imperceptible to us when we're covered by the qualities of material nature, which is the condition of pretty much almost every embodied soul, every embodied spiritual being. However, the understanding is that when we make this sound vibration Om, the super soul, the Paramatma, the supreme being within our hearts, hears this sound vibration, hears us making that vibration, even though he himself does not possess any material ears or other material senses, because because this is a transcendental sound, and the supreme soul within our heart has transcendental senses, transcendental hearing, that person responds to the sound that we make by awakening our own spiritual senses. Ultimately, sound vibrates in the sky, and within that supreme person, there's a spiritual sky that the sound of Om vibrates in. So this is a good reason to chant Om before a yoga class, because we will attract the attention of the supreme person within our hearts, and our yoga practice then has got a spiritual impression or a spiritual element that can help to awaken our spiritual senses, as opposed to just get a good workout on our yoga mats. All right, we have just a few minutes left and several verses to go. Let's just see how we do here. So the next verse. Therefore, transcendentalists undertaking performances of sacrifice, charity, and penance or austerity, in accordance with scriptural regulations, begin always with Om to attain the supreme. That is to say, to put a spiritual intention into any action that otherwise would simply be a material activity. Thus, that activity connects us to transcendence rather than perpetuates karma, actions that generate reactions that we're obliged to experience. In the next verse, 25, without desiring fruitive results, one should perform various kinds of sacrifice, penance or austerity, and charity with the word tat. The purpose of such transcendental activities is to get free from material entanglement. So this is an indication of religious activities, irrespective of any particular form of faith, and again indicates that the realization of our true spiritual nature, that we are Brahman, and therefore, upon having that realization, experiencing freedom from entanglement of material nature is the actual objective of the activity. Chanting Om at the end of classes, and now feeling like you're missing a necessary step in offering a spiritual practice. You know, if you Om at the beginning, it sets the intention. If you Om at the end, then you are expressing the intention after the fact. Either way, you're still elevating the practice to a transcendental position. So I don't think you should worry about that too much. However, I personally like to put mantras at the beginning of a practice to establish the intention rather than the conclusion. You know, again, using good judgment to decide what's appropriate in a particular time and place in order to elevate one's activity to the transcendental platform is what we want to do. So I hope that's helpful. Verses 26 and 27, once again, the absolute truth is the objective of devotional sacrifice, and it is indicated by the word sat. The performer of such sacrifice is also called sat, as are all works of sacrifice, austerity, and charity, which, true to this absolute nature, are performed to please the Supreme Person, O son of Trita. So this brings us back to the folks from the Universalist Church who were leaving water and food in the desert, not just for the people who were crossing, because they understood that to be pleasing to God in accordance with the particular faith form that they subscribed to. Back in the 4th chapter, Krishna speaks of how a sacrifice that is performed in precisely the way he's explaining here, all the way out in the 17th chapter, spiritualizes everyone and everything involved in such a sacrifice or act of charity or what have you, where he says, in such acts of sacrifice, the instrument by which the offering is made, that is to say, the car you drive out to the desert with, the act of the offering, leaving the water, the offering itself, the water, the one who makes the offering, the person engaged in the activity, and the fire that consumes the offering, here more literally meaning, you know, the ritual of a fire sacrifice, but here the person who consumes the offering, the person who drinks the water in the desert, are all of the same spiritual nature, which is to say that you spiritualize the person you give this charity to simply by your own intention, irrespective of their intention of consuming the gift. Thus, one who is absorbed in perfect meditation on such spiritual actions attains perfect spiritual consciousness. So this inclusion of this ultimate spiritual intention perfects all activities and makes everything complete and benefits those involved in the activity even if they don't know it. This is called agyata sukriti, unknown spiritual or pious activity. So one can act in a way that benefits others even when the others involved are not aware of your own spiritual intentions. This is, one shouldn't overestimate the effects of this, but still the idea here is that adding Om Tat Sat or any name of God according to one's understanding of or conception of the Supreme Being elevates any activity to the transcendental level. And Krishna finishes out the chapter by telling us that anything done as sacrifice, charity, or austerity without faith in the Supreme, O son of Pritha, is impermanent. It is called asat and is useless both in this life and the next. So asat, the opposite of sat, sat meaning true, substantive, eternal, imperishable, having basis in reality, changeless. So asat is the opposite of all of these things: false, illusory, temporary, perishable, unreal, and transient, disappears in due course of time. Back in the second chapter of Bhagavad-gita, and in the 16th verse, Krishna tells us that that which has no endurance does not truly exist, whereas that which exists eternally never undergoes change. So there's reality, the world that we experience, and then there's a more real reality, because the world of our experience is constantly changing and has no endurance. Therefore, it is understood to be real, but a lesser reality. Seers of the truth have reached this conclusion by studying the nature of both. So our objective is to get to the real reality, the unreal reality, or the lesser reality, material life. We can think of as a bunch of zeros. Krishna has said repeatedly that ultimately, in the big picture of things, there's no value to the pursuit of material existence as an end unto itself, however comfortable or uncomfortable it may be. Any material aspiration really is not worth anything. But as soon as you add Krishna, or the Supreme Person, to your equation, it's like putting a 1 in front of a bunch of zeros. So instead of nothing, you have a million or a billion or a zillion. So this is from the standpoint of spiritual value, or how we ascribe value from a spiritual context. This is a way of thinking about how adding an intention of acting for the pleasure of the Supreme Person changes a mundane activity, or an apparently mundane activity, into a transcendental activity. And with that, especially since we're a little bit over our time this evening, we conclude our chapter and our class for this evening with a look at charity, or giving of gifts according to the 3 qualities of material nature, and then this threefold indication of Brahman, Om Tat Sat, which spiritualizes any activity by its inclusion as sound, indicating an intention to connect with the Supreme. So last call for questions or comments. Annie, you're very welcome. I'm glad I gave you something to think about. Any other questions or comments? Carly, you're very welcome. My pleasure. If you have any further questions, or if you are watching after the fact, then please send me your questions at hari@hari-kirtana.com. I'm always very, very happy to hear from you, and very happy to field any questions or hear any comments that you have. Next week, we stay back on track with our weekly classes, and we should be able to go every week from now until the end of the Bhagavad-gita. We are in the last chapter now. Chapter 18, the Yoga of Perfect Renunciation. We will begin with Arjuna's questions about renunciation. And Krishna will begin his reply with 3 activities that one should never renounce. We will cover verses 1 through 6. And that's it for this evening. I thank you all very, very much for spending this hour and change with me. I hope this has been truthful and pleasing and beneficial for everyone. I'm very, very happy to be spending this time with you, honored to have you spending this time with me, and I hope to see you again next week or next time, as the case may be. Until then, I hope you have a very, very wonderful evening. See you soon.